Because of events of the last decade, evangelical Christians are very interested in the Islamic world and want to know what is the most effective way to reach Muslims with the gospel. And I'm joined today with Abdu Murray, who's going to help us with that question. Abdu, you are the co-founder and the president of a ministry called Embrace the Truth International. The goal of that ministry is to reach out to non-believers with the truth claims of the gospel. You are an adjunct speaker for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, a lawyer by training with your degree from the University of Michigan Law School. And you grew up, again, as a Muslim and converted to Christianity later in life. And unfortunately, we have the tragic events of 9/11. And I think as a consequence of that and what's happening in Afghanistan and Iraq and other parts of the Middle East, many Christians, and this includes also, I think, people in the West, but also Christians as well, have really a suspicion of Muslims today, and maybe even a fear to some degree. And I want to ask you, this is kind of a sensitive question, but do you think that's a fair characterization? And how does that kind of a characterization impact the effectiveness of presenting the gospel to Muslims? How does that impact, or how should it impact our apologetic approach to Muslims as we share our faith?
Well, that's not only a sensitive question, but a terribly important question. We all have to face up to this and wrestle with this. And I say that in the most sincere terms. We have to wrestle with it, not just have knee-jerk reactions, or not just think we'd like to think of them as them and we're us, and they're bad and we're good, and that kind of thing. We need to wrestle with these issues because there's lots of shades of gray here. Yes, there is a sense in which we can't be naive. There's an ideology that drove 9/11, that drives ISIS, that drives radicals. There's an ideology there, and they do in fact use the Muslim documents to justify why they do what they do in their actions as well. There's a number of Muslims, and thank God that the majority of Muslims don't think the way these people think, and they have reasons, and they would even use parts of the Quran and other parts of Islamic foundational documents to justify their moderation or their peace and these kind of things. So we have that, and by far the majority of Muslims are peace-loving people. With 1.5 to 2 billion Muslims in the world, by certain estimates, we have 90% of them who aren't interested in blowing up airports. They're not. They just want to sort of live the American dream, as it were, if they're here in the West, and just get along with their neighbors. Our suspicions of them is a tragedy that accompanies 9/11. Amongst the deaths and amongst the terrible things that have happened, one of the other tragedies is that Christians have become suspicious and fearful of talking to their Muslim neighbors. These are people for whom Christ died. And if they're people for whom Christ died, then they are people who need to hear the gospel. And the commission to us is not go and talk to those who are easy to talk to or who you don't have fears of. The commission from Jesus in Matthew 28 is to talk to everyone. That includes Muslims and especially our Muslim neighbors. Exchange the ideas, talk with them. They want to experience these conversations. They like talking about Jesus. They like talking about religious ideas. And they like getting to know their neighbors. So don't be fearful of them. They want to talk with you about these things. This is the attitude we should have. And they want to talk about them on deep and meaningful levels. And that means apologetics is all the more critical and all the more crucial.
Now, again, a sensitive question, and I don't want to necessarily put you on the spot, but oftentimes I see many Christians, when they engage in quote-unquote apologetics regarding Islam, are almost looking to expose Islam as a warlike religion, as opposed to actually thinking through how can I connect the gospel to a particular worldview. Could you comment on that? Is
Sure.
that an unfair assessment on my part?
Well, how I look at it is this. There are certain, I think, people who are just interested in exposing certain aspects of Islam, either what they perceive to be historical weaknesses or theological weaknesses or philosophical problems, or those who say, politically speaking, it's a war machine or whatever it might be. My interest is evangelism. That's what we do as a ministry, and my interest is in evangelism. I don't always see the value in that. Sure, there might be some here and there, but my approach has never been to show the falsity of another religious system, even though if I might believe it's actually false. There's a time and a place for that. but I'm also interested in showing the truth, and primarily the truth of the gospel. By implication, all things that are contrary to the gospel are therefore false. I'm not sure I see always the value in showing this is wrong or this is everyone's warlike, because most people aren't. There's two kinds of ways to look at religion. There's a religion that's defined by the core documents and the founder of that religious system, and then the way in which the majority of people actually believe that system. And if the majority of people are not warlike and that kind of thing, then what is the utility of bringing it up? Just get to the heart of the issue, what the gospel actually is for those people. We don't need to bring this stuff up unless there's a time and a place for it, and sometimes there is. But for the most part, give them the gospel, and I think that's the way to approach it.